all, today I am going to be doing a sort of review for the Bone Season series by Samantha Shannon. I say sort of review because I am going to be telling you the 10 reasons why I absolutely love this series. Before we get into those reasons though, I want to give you a little rundown about this series. The Bone Season is slated to be a 7-book series and it is penned by Samantha Shannon. Samantha Shannon wrote the draft of The Bone Season, the first book in the series, while she was in university and actually was signed for a 7-book deal, which they have called the Harry Potter deal, just because people don't get 7-book deals off the bat, typically, as their debut work. The first book in the series is called The Bone Season. The second is The Mime Order. And the third is The Song Rising. The Bone Season was released in 2013, and in the last few years, we've gotten 2 other books. I believe The Mime Order came out in January or February of 2015. And The Song Rising, her 3rd book in the series, came out in March of 2017. These novels follow our protagonist, Paige Mahoney. She is a clairvoyant living in London in 2059. In the year 2059, clairvoyancy is illegal. Those who are clairvoyant are deemed unnatural by the government. Because of this, there has become an entire underground movement of clairvoyant humans, and it is a illegal and often crime-ridden world. And Paige Mahoney is at the heart of this in one of the most prominent street gangs of clairvoyance. Not only that, but she is also second in command in her gang, and she is an extremely gifted and rare clairvoyant. Our story really takes off after Paige is drugged and kidnapped and taken to an internment prison, essentially. And this world she's known is flipped on its head, and a conspiracy type story is revealed. One reason I love the story so much, which is not going to be one of my 10, is that it just kind of found me at the right time. I'm not going to tell you this book is perfect. I honestly don't like a huge part of the story, but majority of the story still absolutely fascinates me. And I love the characters so much. I have given all of these books 5 out of 5 stars, and while they're not perfect, they're perfect to me. When I read the first book, I read it I think a week or 2 after it was first published, and it hit me at the right time. I had just graduated from college, so I, one, identified a lot with Samantha Shannon, the author of these books, but also was starting to read a lot of YA, and so it was a nice change of pace to read about a character who's in her 20s and who's trying to figure out her life and figure out what's going on. And that's like what every new college grad is going through, I feel like. And so I related to Paige in a lot of ways. Obviously, I'm not clairvoyant, I'm not doing illegal things, but there was this sense of like being a 20-something trying to figure out your life that really put me on the same page as her more than any other YA book I had been reading. There's a lot of other things that made me fall in love with these books in that first reading, but those are part of the 10 reasons I'm going to be talking to you today about. So that is actually a really good transition into the number 1 thing I wanted to talk about today, is our character Paige Mahoney. I personally identified with her a lot just because she was different than a lot of characters I was reading about, but she also has some of the standard characteristics we love in our protagonist. Paige is strong-willed and she is brilliant. I think she is such a smart character. I think she has a very level head on her shoulders, and when things go wrong, which they definitely do in the story, she pieces things out logically. She tries to figure them out. When she does make a mistake or does something stupid, she calls herself out on it. That's not something you see that often in books, I feel like, and I absolutely love it. It makes Paige feel very realistic. Paige is strong-willed and smart, and honestly one of the best characters I've ever read about. I think she's just so fantastic. She doesn't just accept things that other characters tell her necessarily, and I just really like how she puzzles things out for herself and how she thinks methodically about things. Samantha Shannon definitely has this kind of chosen one trope going on with her. She's not like the chosen one in terms of like the one to save the world, but she is a very rare clairvoyant and one of the highest orders of clairvoyancy in this world. So in terms of that, she is like a chosen one because she is put on this pedestal that nobody else can really obtain because they're not like her in the abilities that are provided in this world. And honestly, like I said, Paige is just one of my favorite characters of all time. Number 2 is the world we had. This world is incredibly expansive. Because of that, it's hard to get into the story, and because of that, a lot of people see this book as info dumpy. You have to realize going into this book, it is building up for a 7-book series. And within each of these books, we have additional world building going on. So yeah, it does feel info dumpy because the story has to be expanded to fill 7 books, to tell a story in 7 books. This is an incredibly vast, expansive world. It's one of the most detailed and thought out worlds I've ever experienced, which means yes, it's hard to kind of get into that world sometimes, and it's hard to kind of grasp everything, but once you do, this world feels incredibly detailed and complete, and in terms of that, it has a very like Lord of the Rings vibe to me, not in all like it feels like Lord of the Rings, but I don't know of a world that's put together so brilliantly in my mind besides that. Samantha Shannon does that really well. She is in this first book tackling pages past as well as building up this world, and then, you know, a few chapters in, she flips this world on its head and kind of opens up the world you're just learning about to be vast and different after Paige is kidnapped. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but I think it's so smart and so vast, and I really appreciate it. I don't find that the info dumping is bad at all. I think it's explained really well, and I think the way certain things are done and explained are very clever. We have this really nice clairvoyant hierarchy system. We have a very interesting government system. We have this new level that's brought in a few chapters into the story. It's just really complex, but really beautifully done. The third thing I absolutely love about this book is it's something you can't really put into a box. I love that it's just not one thing. It's not a fantasy book. It's not a dystopian. It's not a coming of age story. It's not a revolution story. It's so many things. This is an alternative history futuristic story. This is a dystopian. This is a fantasy. And yeah, sometimes that makes it hard to explain this book, but it also makes this book so much more when you're reading it because it doesn't fall into one box or one category. The number 4 thing I really enjoy about this story are the villains. The villains are very unique, very interesting. They're part of the story that makes this a very fantasy element for me, and I think it's just very interesting the way they are brought in, the way they're explained, and I'm really interested in seeing how their mythology and folklore is expanded in the future books, because Samantha Shannon does say that books 4 through 7 are going to deal a lot more with their mythology, and I'm really excited to see how that story progresses, expands our world, and changes our viewpoints of certain characters. Some of these characters are super interesting and some of them are just super harsh. We also have different kinds of villains. This is a story where we are working in like this crime environment. So there are definitely people within the underground that Paige works for that are sinister, doing evil things, dark things, that are just human clairvoyants like her. Which leads me into my next point, 5, which is I absolutely love the moral ambiguity of the story. In the first few pages of the story, Paige accidentally commits murder. So we already have a character who's morally ambiguous. She works in a crime facility, and while she's a great character, and so is her best friend, a lot of the people around her are doing some dark, sinister things. Like I said, the crime people in this world are doing some crazy things. And then the creatures that are running these internment camps are obviously doing some evil things. And then they have a monster they're fighting against. And there are all these levels of evil in this world. And each set of evil has like this, are they all bad? Are they all good? What's really going on here kind of vibe. And I really love the moral ambiguity of the story that every character kind of presents. The 6th thing I absolutely love about the story is its current relevancy. There are some scenes, especially in the 3rd book, that are very interesting and have ties to current political conversations that have happened in the last election cycle, we'll say. Not going to spoil anything for you, and if you've read the books and are confused about that, you can talk to me on Twitter or in the comments down below, and we will discuss that. But basically, I asked Samantha Shannon about this in a recent Q&A she did, and she told me that it was not planned. It wasn't like the real life events inspired the scene or these scenes. But when you're writing dystopian, it's not surprising that things like this can pop up because you're writing a story that's whole point as a dystopian genre is to mirror what our governments could currently be going to do. But just like the internment camp has some relevancy currently, so do other aspects of the story that come up. And I find it very interesting how Samantha Shannon has advertently and inadvertently tied in some really current relevancy into this very futuristic, dystopian, fantastical world she has built. The seventh thing I absolutely love about this series is that I am able to form my own theories because I've been reading this book since the very beginning. Because it has an expansive world and it's hard to tell where it's going sometimes, I get to make my own theories about where it's going. And I'm hardly ever one to theorize about what's going to happen next. It's their story. They'll tell me what's going to happen when the next book comes out. But because there's so much to this world, I'm constantly second guessing what's going to happen next, guessing how things are going to tie in, making theories based on little nuggets of information we have. And I absolutely love that this is a story I get to do that with. I love that. And I just have so many theories and thoughts, and I just get so excited thinking about them. The eighth thing I absolutely love about the series is that it's constantly pushing the limits and keeping me on my toes. You think you've figured out this world that Samantha Shannon has written, and then she will twist it on its head, she will add something else, she will do something shocking, character will say something, new elements will pop up, there will be a twist that's not really a twist. I don't know how to explain it, and I don't know how she does it, but this world keeps expanding in every book, and it's incredible. I just love how the story continues to continue, and like everything happens immediately after. Like the second book starts exactly where the first one ends, like exactly. Like honestly, it probably starts like 20 minutes later or less, 15 minutes after the first book is ended. The third book is like same thing. Right after the second book has ended, we're continuing that conversation that we just like left off on. And yet, each story still manages to burst the pages open and burst the world open and expand it. The ninth thing I absolutely love about the series is constantly taking me to new places. Obviously, London and the future are places I've never been to, but within the second and the third book, we also get to visit other parts of the world, not just London, and we also get to hear about different parts of the world. We hear about how America is dealing with the clairvoyancy issue and how other countries are dealing with it. And in the fourth book, we're going to be going to a different location. In the third book, we visit another location. And it's just really interesting to see other parts of this world and how they're handling that and the political ramifications of clairvoyancy in their parts of the world. A lot of these are going back to how much I love how expansive this world is, because this kind of does that too. But I really like visiting locations I never have, because I feel like in a lot of dystopian books, you get what's happening here. Say the Hunger Games, you get what's happening in Pan Am, which is essentially North America. I don't know what's happening in Africa or Asia or anywhere else in the world. I just know what's happening in North America. And I'm not bashing the Hunger Games at all because it's one of the best books of all time, but that's a common thing, I feel like. And it's really nice to see a story that's talking about the different parts of the world and how they're taking the same thing in a different context in a different way. It's just really interesting, and I love that. The last thing I want to talk about today is Samantha Shannon's writing. Samantha Shannon is a great writer and actually getting better as each story goes on, which is to be expected. As she writes more, she will gain in skill set. The Bone season was her debut, and with every author, typically their writing gets better with time and as they hone their craft, and Samantha Shannon is no exception. But in particular, one of, if not my all-time favorite quote from a book ever happens to be in The Mime Order, the second book in the series. And that quote is, "Words are everything. Words give wings even to those who have been stamped upon. Broken beyond all hope of repair." As a reader, as a writer, as a lover of stories, and as a person who really believes that we can be making a difference in the world by speaking up, this quote hits me in the heart and in the gut, and I love it so much. So those are the top 10 reasons why I love the Bone Season series by Samantha Shannon so very much. It does have some issues with it, I get that. I'm not on board with the romance. It is not my OTP. I don't ship the couple in this book. And to be honest, I might be deluding myself, but I don't believe it's endgame. And that's just my personal opinion. I see the issues that people have with this book. But one, there's so many things I love about it. And two, it came to me at the right point in my life that I don't know if I can ever not love this series. But regardless, I think this book is so incredibly fun and it has so much going for it. If you did enjoy this video, you should give it a thumbs up and you should also subscribe. And you should comment down below and let me know if you've read the series. If you've read the series, what your favorite thing is about it. And if you haven't, if you're planning on reading it. I will see you in my next video. Bye!